Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Cacophony. I am your host, Wolf, and I am joined by.
C.A. Daniels.
Foe.
Jared.
And we are here to talk about the most nebulous of things that I'm sure many writers would have loved when they first started out to just be better at and know more about writing dialogue. So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, no,
Jumping straight into it, then let's start off with listing a little bit of what is dialogue. Well, dialogue is, simply put, the spoken interaction between two characters, or the written version of the spoken interaction between two characters, aka talking. So let's start off with going over and listing a few of the rules that surround writing dialogue. You don't have to list them all. We'd probably be here for quite some time and argue a lot about what those rules are exactly, somewhat.
yeah.
So let's list a
And
few though.
and this sponsorship and this God damn it. This podcast has been
Here we go.
sponsored. This con this
This what
podcast
now?
this podcast has been sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. If you
Lord.
join in now, then you will get a free
I can't.
in-game currency.
I don't
Thank
know
you.
if we're allowed to do that.
I'm trying to BS them, man. You're ruining the
I
illusion.
don't think that's legal.
It's totally legal. I'm pretty sure.
We definitely won't
Moderately-
get in trouble. I definitely won't delete this from the video.
Moderately
recording.
legal to say
So-
to say the least.
Getting back on topic, are there any
Yes.
particular rules that any of you would like to most certainly bring up that you think are pretty important to writing dialogue?
I think
How long
I think,
have you got?
I think one rule of writing dialogue is like don't make it sound uncharacteristic. Like say you have a character who's comedic, don't make them say like something super serious in like a comedic moment and vice versa.
Okay. Do you have anything, Phil, or is that all from you, Jared?
Yes, I do, but I'm a little hesitant to get into a rant this early on in the episode.
Go for it.
If we're talking strictly about rules, I think the most important thing that I see happen everywhere is people not understanding how to punctuate dialogue. Which, many people don't learn these things. That's acceptable. I understand. I'm not going to harp on anybody. But if you want your dialogue to read well and be taken seriously, you need to learn how to punctuate it properly.
I have definitely fallen into this trap myself in my writing. Go ahead, Phil. You're up. If you want to rant. Now's your chance.
All right. The word said is a generalized tool, but not one you should use for every single nail in the frickin' coffin.
Oh, we're
Alright.
going to fight. We are going to fight.
The word said, yeah, sure, you can use it to say that someone's saying something, but that's all that it can imply, nothing more. If you use other words here, not necessarily every single time, it's fine to use the word said. Not only are you giving your audience some variety there, but you're also implying things about the character's mood. If someone babbles, right, you have it's easier for the readers to, and I hate this description and hate myself for giving it, form a picture in their minds. I'm sorry, that's an awful description, but it's the one that first came to mind.
It's fair.
Using words other than said and asked. Oh, well,
Okay.
you
You're
go.
wrong, and here's why.
Fair.
I won't be so forceful, but I have the opposite point of view, which is that if you're using a dialogue tag other than the basics more than once a page, you're doing it way too much. Way too much. And the reason for this is that the dialogue tag is not the important thing, it is the dialogue itself. And the dialogue and the prose around it should be able to convey what the character is saying and how they're saying it. You can use a dialogue tag to help yourself along in that regard, but by and large, you want people, the reader, to just gloss right over it because it makes the entire thing smoother to read.
Yeah. You also have to come up with like some good dialogue too, I believe. Like add some I guess metaphors or something like that. Like
Okay.
yeah, like
Mm.
don't make it sound very boring. Like, okay, he said, "Please give me the apple, or I will hurt you." No, you should write like, he spoke very intensely. "Please give me the apple. I will break your gosh darn face." Something like that.
Fair enough.
I'm yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not.
you're fine. You're doing great.
No, I'm not
It's
much of a.
definitely
Yeah, I'm not much of a writer or something like that. So.
that's fair. It's definitely also your first time here, so it can take a bit of getting used to. That's perfectly fine. So,
Mm,
these are some different, there are definitely many rules, and definitely many people will interpret them somewhat differently and look at them somewhat differently in how they wish to go about them. And speaking of that, looking at the different rules surrounding dialogue and grammatically and not, are there any particular rules you're willing to break or bend yourself in your own writing, or that you're somewhat lax on when you read?
to me, it's like I don't really see any rules for writing dialogue, like natural rules.
Mm-hmm.
But like, um, I guess one rule is, uh, don't in a bunch of profanity, or like don't use profanity as a way to make your content seem more adult, because as always, it's not just curse words that make things like more adult like. It's the situations, the relatable stuff in it, and other stuff in it as well.
Mm-hmm. Who would like to go next?
Well, I come at this from much the opposite direction. I am an editor of the English language as my day job, so I unfortunately that means that I can't actually overlook mistakes in the writing. They don't ruin my ability to read it, but I notice them every time.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer to your question is none, really. I don't let any slip past. And in my own writing, I try very, very hard to keep to all the rules.
Specifically asking you about that, I mean, you always kind of hear the connotation within writing that they're not necessarily rules, they're guidelines, right? And they're meant to be broken and bent at times when it serves your purpose or when it can be done well. Is that something you, as an editor, would agree with or are staunchly against that particular interpretation?
Oh, no, I agree. But
Okay.
for the most part, you have to keep to the rules to maintain consistency and readability.
Mhm. Okay.
And obviously, like you said, there are stylistic breaks that can be accomplished, but if you're doing that over and over again, it doesn't work.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. A notable example of this is using the word and to start a sentence, which you're taught in English class never to do. But in English class, when you read Shakespeare, you see him do that. There are some things that, yeah, you can kind of get away with for stylistic points or to create a certain mood within your writing. You can do that. It's just you got to be careful which ones you break.
Hmm.
You know what? I did think of one that is not technically a rule that I never forgive, which is ending dialogue with an ellipsis.
Oh, what if?
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
It's the
th-
three periods.
three periods
Oh,
to imply that the person's voice trailed off. It makes my eyes leave the page and come back later.
I do the I do the ellipsis. I do the three
Ellipsis.
dot ellipsis. I do
Yeah,
the
there you go.
ellipsis. I do the ellipsis thing sometimes, mostly a lot.
I think
Yeah.
the if you're doing the trail of thought is lost, I think you're supposed to use what is called the em dash, if I'm not mistaken.
I think the ellipsis thing is done when like your character in a is like in a tone that means like he's backing away. Like, say something like this: "Oh, hey guys, what's up? I just got back from doing the thing, and I'm ready to set our evil plan in motion." Oh, like he just read the room and realized that he's spilling the beans. So
Hmm.
I think that's what's mostly supposed to be used for.
Well, yes and no. That's what most people end up using it for, is the idea of trailing off or being interrupted at times. Things of that nature is what most people use the ellipsis for. But if you're interrupting dialogue, normally you would go for the em dash instead.
Yeah, I
And
mean, for the actual, and then this isn't like a stylistic thing. This is just base English rules. The ellipsis kind of can't be used that way. or at least it's not supposed to be. But yes, the M dash is what you would use if you're going to stop dialogue without actually finishing the sentence.
But we're not necessarily a writing podcast here. We're definitely not qualified. At least I'm personally not qualified for it. I think one of the only people who might be qualified for it here would be Cad. So enjoy him doing his own writing podcast at a future date potentially. I'm sure he
I
would
would
love
like
it.
to plug my guide to common writing mistakes, and
I can give a link to
I'm
that in
joking.
the
I'm joking.
description below, if you would like for me to.
I told you I wouldn't go full editor on you. I will, from here out, stop doing that.
But let's jump into a bit more personal opinion here, which is, I'm sure, what people might be more interested to hear. What is your approach to writing dialogue, and do you have a particular way you try and get into a given character's headspace?
Okay, first, I just think of the character. I think of the type of person they are, and then I write down the dialogue of what I think a character would say or sound like in that moment. Like if there's a character who's goofy or whatever, I would make him say a bunch of ridiculous stuff like blah 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 blah. If there's a character that's blunt and serious, I would write down like a serious line of dialogue for them that fits with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about like if you were this person, what would you say? I believe.
That's fair. Who would like to go next? Phil? Cad?
Cad.
Oh,
Changing stuff.
I did a lot of talking earlier. I was just letting other people go. The way I do it is I talk out loud a lot. I read the lines to myself out loud. And I also, while I'm constructing them, I have for every character a list of what I call key phrases, which are things that I have either heard that character say or read that character say that to me define their voice very clearly. And so I can fall back on those to take the things I have written and put them in that voice and think, does this sound like something this character would say and how they would say it?
Do you have to be careful of overuse of those key phrases, though? Like, say, for instance,
Oh
using
no,
mice.
I don't use them in the writing. I use them as a
Oh,
litmus test for myself.
okay, I see.
So I compare the sound of the key phrase to the sound of what I have written, and if it makes sense together, if they sound correct, then it's fine. But if they don't, then I have to rework.
That's fair. That's an interesting way of doing that. Phil, anything to add?
I tend to do most of my writing at 3 in the morning, so I am incredibly out of my mind when writing it, and then, the following morning, I read back through what I've written. Sometimes I'll take longer if I forget about it, and if it makes sense to me later when I've completely separated from the mentality I was in when I wrote that, then I figure it's probably decent. Uh, I don't consider myself particularly good at writing dialogue. I look more at this from a perspective of literary analysis because that's really my only education in this area.
That's fair. That's fair. It's definitely, again, as I said, most of us here are definitely not qualified to talk about writing from an educational standpoint. So we're definitely not a writing podcast, that is for sure. For me, right, I write one shots. That's pretty much all I've ever written. I've never written a long form story. So I do, and for most of my one shots, I do think I tend to focus more on dialogue because I do think that's more often than not what most one shots do, and that's more often than not how they sell themselves. If the interaction between the characters you're using within a one shot aren't good, then your one shot is most certainly not good. Nothing else can carry it because that's more often than not all it has to carry it. So for me, I try to set myself up within the scene that I'm writing. I try to set myself up within the idea of the show, I guess you would say. I try and set up to be okay. I want this to feel like this is something. If you saw it in the show, it would make perfect sense, and you wouldn't bat an eye at it. Like it feels like it would belong. So, eh, that's what I'll try to do for myself, and how I tend to approach writing my scenes and dialogue and the characters as well. Um, Something else I wanted to bring up is that, and it has completely slipped my mind, unfortunately. This is why you write things down, ladies and gentlemen. It was the the idea of, well, shoot. I guess we'll move on. Maybe I'll think of it and bring it up at the end for you and surprise you all. So, moving back along to our intended script, what are some of the pratfalls you've noticed that people tend to fall into most often when writing, and what are some of the common issues you've personally had to overcome with your own writing as well, and how would you recommend people avoid these issues?
Oh, I don't. I don't think I have an answer for that one actually.
That's fine.
Um,
We'll move on. Phil.
Yeah, I definitely have an answer to this one, and this is less within writing dialogue as writing in general, is use of the passive voice is absurdly common because it's not really talked about outside of kind of higher level English classes. And so it's normal to use in conversation, right? Talking about will be, is, have, had, all that. That's normal to use in conversation and in fact is perfectly fine in dialogue. But when you're writing the rest of whatever you're writing, be it an essay, fan fiction, or even your own novel or what have you, it makes it more so that things happen to your characters rather than your characters happening to the things around them. And honestly, the only way I've been able to deal with it is Control F on Google Docs and searching in for the words. It's
Okay.
unfortunately common, and it just kind of makes your characters weaker, right? They don't do things, things happen to them.
Hmm. Interesting.
mm,
It may be worth explaining the passive voice.
Oh,
I-
yeah, I should probably do that. The passive voice, I can't remember the exact definition, but it occurs when you use a to be verb, right? So be, is, are, was, do, did, all that. I believe have, had, all that, and the various conjugations of those. And all right, an example would be he had blue eyes. This is also an example of a case where there's not much you can do to escape the passive voice. You're describing how something is, and it is hard. And yeah, sure, you can get around that, right? She noticed his eyes, blue as the sea, is one example of a way to get around that.
Okay.
mm.
Cad, you're up.
I think Cat already went.
Kind of, but it's his turn to go again.
Oh, I
Insofar as things I notice people fall into a lot with dialogue, uh, something a lot of people mess up is not making it sound natural, um, which it tends to just come from practice. And the common strategy applied to fix the issue is to listen to other people and how they talk. Go eavesdrop on some conversations in a coffee shop. Well, not right now, but when we're able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And just write down what people are saying and how they're saying it so that you can replicate the flow of normal conversation in your own dialogue that you're writing. That's actually, it helped me a lot because my dialogue used to be very robotic and very samey. It all sounded like the same person was talking because it was all coming out of my head. But once I started thinking about it in terms of a conversation between different people who were not me, the differences between the dialogue started to come out more, and it's something I always have to go back in the edit and fix even today.
Okay.
Perhaps instead of heading to a coffee shop, head to your local Discord server, perhaps such as the Crow's Nest, and hop into a voice call and just listen to what people are saying. After all, gotta maintain that social distance.
Plug as well. Thank you.
no,
Subtle but effective.
no, that is how you do a podcast promotional sponsorship thing.
I didn't know we were getting paid by the Crow's Nest. I need to talk with a few people about that and get paid myself. Moving right along, something I was supposed to bring up earlier and didn't because I forgot it because I'm terrible at writing these things and planning them out. what do you think? Do you think there are any potential differences between writing for an OC character or an established character? And this is definitely more related to potentially fan fiction, most certainly. But do you think there are any differences between writing for an original character and an established character, like say Ruby or Weiss, or other et cetera, established characters? Insert here, whatever it is.
Mm, I think. Uh, I think. Uh, what was it? Oh yeah. I think like when you're writing for an OC character, you can basically do as you please with them. But when you're writing for like an established character, you have to like really make sure the dialogue sounds like something they would say and doesn't sound like too uncharacteristic. Uh, yeah, and that's what I think. Because like when you're writing dialogue for an OC, that's fine. You can do whatever. You can make them sound however you please. But when like you're working officially on a show that you made the OC for, but you're actually writing dialogue for an already official established character, you have to like really make it sound like something they would say that their voice actors that would like translate well with their voice and everything. And just I don't know, don't make it sound off characteristic. Don't have like Ruby spouting off profanity all the time because that's not really something a lot of people imagine her to do. Or like don't have Yang sound so naturally calm or something because she's always on fire or whatever. Just be very just make sure that that your character that the roleplay character I gosh darn it, I lost track. I was so busy talking, I just wandered off. I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're doing great. But yeah, I get where exactly you're coming from. Try and keep within the characters if you can.
Yeah.
It's good advice. Who would like to go next?
Uh, Guess I'll go ahead. I honestly consider writing for pre-established characters to be easier than writing for OCs because with those
Same.
pre-existing characters, they've got mannerisms that have been developed by other people and expressed, right? You already know that and you can work with that. If there's a character who, for example, commonly misuses the word like, they say and all that that's unfortunately common in modern conversations today, or they pause a lot and say, "Oh," as I've been doing a lot.
Like
That's a mannerism you can use when writing that. That's something you don't have to come up with, and that's one way to make your dialogue sound far more similar to how the character talks in the show or wherever you have borrowed the character from. But with an OC, you got to come up with that, man. That's on you. You got to keep that consistent. You got to decide that. You have to make sure it fits into how the OC has been designed.
Okay. Anything to add, Kat?
No, I think they covered it very well. There is one addition I would make is that it's actually a little easier to write OC dialogue because I shouldn't say it's easier. It is less risky to write OC dialogue because you don't have to keep to an already established concept of what the character sounds like. But flip side of that is if you're writing the established character, yeah, you have to keep to what they sound like, and you have to make very careful not to fall into what I call fan canon phrasing, which is where you take other people's concepts of what the character sounds like and use that in your own writing. A good example of this is a lot of people like to have Weiss using terms like dunce and dolt when she's used them perhaps twice in the entire show. That sort of thing.
I have
But if you want to make
fallen.
your OC do that, by all means, because you are creating that character's voice whole cloth.
Makes sense. I have also fallen into that trap in the past of doing that and have had to have gone back and edited things to make less use of the word dolt when writing Weiss. Something else I'll bring up before we get on to our final point is, and I'm curious to hear about this. Do you think there's any difference? We talked about the differences between potentially writing for an OC and an established character. What do you think, if there are any, do you think there are any differences, or what do you think about writing for, say, a secondary or tertiary character who is established? Like, say, as an example, looking at Ruby, you know, do you think there's a difference between writing for, say, Ruby as compared to, say, Team Auburn or Mei Zedong or Robin, for instance, or any of the Aesops, or compare that to, uh, I guess Whitley or Weiss's butler, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm a terrible
Klein,
fan. Klein, that's it. I wanted to say Clive. I knew it
Calvin
wasn't
Klein.
Clive. But yeah, like, do you think there's any potential difference between writing for those secondary and tertiary characters who are technically established, but very much minimal?
For me, it's like it sounds like there's no problem writing for them. It's like when you know the characters and you know their personalities and everything, you have to make that dialogue fit. Like for example, Whitley. He's a spoiled. He's like the golden child. Jock loves him. Jock loves him more than his own daughters. Whitley's like Jock's favorite and everything, and he's very smart too and a lot of other stuff. So like you have to make him sound like a spoiled rich kid or something like that. And I guess the thing with the Aesops, like if you write dialogue for say Marrow, then like, he's just the guy who's trying his hardest to fit in, try and make the dialogue sound like that. It's basically like if you know the characters' personalities and like have a good idea of what they've been through and everything, then you just base the dialogue off of that and their current situation and what they would say in that situation. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think in cases such as Robin and the Aesops and Whitley to a lesser degree, you already have, as I mentioned previously, kind of existing mannerisms, or at least a template to build off of. You know some of how they behave and can kind of predict from there. However, with more background characters, such as I believe you mentioned Team Auburn, who I don't even recall, um,
They're the
Um,
team that Team Ruby fought in episode 1 of volume 3.
Hoverboard
There's like
Girl, Reese Clores,
eh,
so
Hoverboard
like,
Girl, that
best
team.
girl. Yeah.
yeah, so like 3 lines of dialogue. There's not much that they've ever said, and there's been very little done to establish them as people. It's almost like writing an OC. Try and keep it somewhat similar to how what dialogue they've been given has been written. However, keep in mind that that could be an unusual circumstance for the characters, right? They could be behaving a little bit unusually for their norm.
Hmm.
It's honestly, I think that's some of the hardest stuff because you have sometimes a framework, sometimes even not even a partial framework, and people have already established in their heads ideas of how those characters behave, and you're going to be potentially running counter to some of that.
Mm, yeah.
Anything to add, Cad?
Not particularly. Like they said, if the person doesn't have any or even only has a few lines, you're essentially building OC dialogue because there's nothing to build off of. If they have some, though, yeah, try to stick to what that person sounds like, or perhaps the personality they've conveyed on screen if they have it all. Other than that, though, yeah, that's pretty much the same advice I would give.
Okay, fair enough. I was going to ask the next question would be like, do you consider the writing for that secondary or tertiary character who has very little dialogue to work with or framework to work with? I was going to ask, do you see that as more of an OC and not an established character at that point? But I guess you've answered that question already, more or less.
Yeah. If there here's a question. I know this isn't scripted, but I
Go
think it's
ahead.
good. If there was one character for Ruby that you would like to write dialogue for, who would it be? It could be anything. It could be a main character or a secondary character or just one of those Royal Festival tournament people. For me, I think one character who I would currently like to write dialogue for is Nolan because like he's just a cool character. If you don't remember Nolan, he's the guy with the cow taser, I mean cattle prod who electrocuted Ren and Nora back in volume 3. And it's like he doesn't even have much lines. He just literally says what 2 times while Oobleck does his monologue explaining. And it's like I don't write dialogue, but I think I can write down a little something for him. Yeah. And it's also because, Nolan's best boy alongside Mercury, who's also best boy. So yeah.
Fair enough.
I would write for
Anyone?
Neo.
Who?
Neo,
Yeah. Oh no.
because
Nice.
nonverbal dialogue is so much fun.
Oh my God. Have you ever watched anything from Aardman Productions like Shaun the Sheep and Wallace and Gromit? Because the way how they
Yep,
do
I was thinking about Gromit as I was thinking about this question.
yeah, because like the way how they just do silent stuff is excellent. Like you don't need I'm kind of saying this ironically, but at the same time seriously, given the current topic of the chat. But when you're writing dialogue for a character that's silent, you just don't write dialogue at all. You plan out their movements and everything and how they and their expressions. It's like, there's that. So
Who would you write for, Phil? Or like to
I'm
write
thinking
most for?
I would probably want to do Oobleck because
Hmm.
as I'm certain has been apparent, I have a habit of speaking inordinately quickly, as well as being all over the place, which would make that easier for me than writing for someone who is patient and can think for more than 30 seconds without getting lost.
I would write for Oobleck as well. He's just because like for me, I write down like a lot of long stuff, like a lot of long paragraphs and theories and everything, and that would be kind of good for Oobleck since he monologues and like speaks a lot about history and everything. He's just I don't know. I would write dialogue for that character because he talks long stuff, I talk long stuff, so it's kind of fitting.
Fair enough.
Yes.
For my answer to your question, I would really love and enjoy to write for Team Indigo, Nebula,
Oh,
Do, Gwen, and
Doggo.
Octavia.
Doggo, thank you so much for saying that. Indigo is my favorite team, honestly,
I love those
because
characters, but I've never been able to personally capture their voices, I feel like. So I've never wrote anything for them. The character who I've.
Question,
Oh, go ahead.
just quick clarification. I might be misremembering. Was Indigo the one based off the cosplayer group?
Yes, the
no,
fans.
Team Indigo was for people. Team Indigo was created because four girls won like an Indiegogo campaign supporting like a
Laser
Rooster Teeth
Team.
movie. Yeah, Laser Team, which is a great movie. Check it out. And they basically won that spot on Ruby. They won a voice role on Ruby because of the fundraiser campaign thing. So yeah,
Yeah, they're the fan created team.
and that's one of the main reasons I like about them because they're just like they're fan made characters and they won the contest, so yeah, go on them. And it's like I really want like more on them because think about it, you did this character, you basically won this contest, your character gets to be a part of a team with your three other buddies, and if the company wants you to do something else with them, then then it's like, like say the Team Indigo appears in they appear in a book or something, and like Rooster Teeth wants to contact the people who create the characters to see if they want any insight or whatever on them. Because like that's kind of the best thing about them.
Fair enough. But
I
as I
didn't
was
know that.
saying, um, I would like to write for them, but I've never been able to really capture what I feel might be their voices or what most people would probably think their voices would be, so I've never wrote anything for them. I've
They
just never been
already
able to find a way that I feel really works for them in my writing. So the
they
character I've
already
ended up writing most for is Raven.
Oh, Raven. Goddamn Raven.
I do
Raven.
love Raven, so I
Yeah,
will stand by her. She is my favorite character.
she's just the sarcastic burb mom. Oh god, saying burb out loud just sounds really wrong. And it's like I would kind of write dialogue for Raven too, because she's very sarcastic and dry of a lot of things.
A lot of
It's also
cynicism there, and it's fun to write
yeah,
for.
yeah, and it's like it's not only that, but she also has like this survival of the fittest instinct while also being like a major hypocrite at times. So she's kind of like an interesting character to kind of write for.
Fair enough. But
If there was, continue.
moving right along. Finishing
Oh,
up our cast, our final topic of the day. Are there any tips you would like to impart to people that you've picked up in your own writing and reading other stories and other people's works, published and not, that you would like to impart to people as this is something you absolutely should do and learn now?
add catchphrases, but don't add catchphrases all the time. And I guess like write down good one-liners, like lines of dialogue that just happen naturally and are just like still very entertaining.
Easier said than done.
Oh,
But what would your advice be, Cadenville? Whichever of you wishes to go first.
Acquire a beta or editor or someone for that kind of position, because you can look over your own thing a million different times and still miss something. Someone else looks over it with fairly fresh eyes, they're going to see things you don't. Different perspectives are always very helpful, and especially I've seen this when writing mine because I haven't really gotten much feedback on anything I've written. Is other people looking through it catches mistakes far faster than you will.
Fair enough. Cad?
Does it have to be just one thing?
No, anything you want. As many things as you want. Feel free.
Okay, I'll keep it brief. First, like I said earlier, read everything you write out loud, not just the dialogue, but everything. And if you're not comfortable doing that, or if your mouth hurts or whatever, I use a text to speech app to read things back to me. Super helpful. I keep catching stuff, even today, from stuff I wrote years ago. What was my second thing? It was very important. Oh, yeah, what I said about listening to other people talk and then trying to replicate the flow of conversation. That helps a lot.
and also write down relatable dialogue. Like just write down naturally happening stuff that occurs in everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
and also don't be afraid to overdo it. And you can always take stuff away. The edit is 90% of the writing.
Yeah, and don't, I guess, don't make the dialogue sound like very dated or something like that, unless you're doing it for a joke or whatever. Because like if you write it down now or something like that, and it just like doesn't age well over time, then it's going to become kind of something, honestly.
Well, dudes and dudettes, if you would like to listen to more of this Totally Tubular podcast, bad jokes.
What was that about sounding dated?
Uh, it's like how most movies from the '90s like quote and reference these types of shows.
Sorry, Jared. I know what you mean. I'm making fun of Wolf because
Yeah.
of what he just said.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
But that is actually all from us here at the Cacophony. I think we've gone over about everything we can for this. We're definitely not a professional writing podcast. You will find much more help in other places from actual English teachers and other people who can give you way more help than we could here, because I can guarantee you I'm definitely not qualified to give that kind of help. But with that said, I was your host, Wolf, and I was joined by...
Jared.
Well,
C.A. Daniels.
And if you would like to we do hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you would like to get in touch with us, come visit us at the Crow's Nest Discord. You can hang out with us, talk with us, and get more opinions from many different people, and actually get writing help from other people here who are qualified, somewhat more qualified than, say, I am, or some of the rest of us, to help you in your writing, whether it be dialogue or anything related. Come check out the Crow's Nest Discord. With that said, as always, we hope you enjoyed, and we hope you let us know what you think in the comments below or on the Crow's Nest Discord itself. And until
And
next time.
And this was sponsored. This
was not sponsored. Ignore him.
Didn't
He
have
lies.
sponsors.
He lies to
alright,
you.
where's the gag?
Gosh darn it.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care.
And now it's time for the after show.
No.
Aw. We don't talk